Nobody told you what this would feel like. There was no conversation at the kitchen table about net worth. No parent who sat you down and explained compound interest or asset allocation or what it means to own something that appreciates while you sleep. The financial vocabulary you use now, you built yourself. Word by word, mistake by mistake, in the margins of a life that was not designed to produce what you are becoming. You are the first. That phrase sounds like a celebration. It is also a description of a specific kind of loneliness that people who are not first will not fully understand. This is not a story about luck. It is not a story about grinding. It is a story about what actually happens, psychologically, financially, and socially, when someone crosses a threshold that no one in their bloodline has ever crossed before. What it costs. What it changes. What it doesn't. You did not start with nothing. That framing is too clean, too cinematic. What you started with was something more complicated than nothing. You started with a family that worked. Parents who showed up, who paid rent mostly on time, who kept the lights on through arrangements you were too young to understand and old enough to feel. There was love. There was also a specific relationship with money that you absorbed before you had language for it. Money was scarce. Money was stressful. Money was the thing adults argued about in lowered voices after they thought you were asleep. Money was never discussed as something that could be built. It was discussed as something that had to be managed, rationed, survived. You internalized that. Not as a lesson. As a baseline. The first time you made a financial decision that contradicted your upbringing, you did not feel proud. You felt like you were doing something slightly wrong. Like you were breaking a rule no one had written down. You opened an investment account and it felt presumptuous. You started contributing to a retirement fund and something in you whispered that people like you don't do this. Not yet. Not until things stabilize. Things never stabilize on their own. You learned that slowly. There is a gap between where you started and where you are going, and the gap is not just financial. The gap is informational. People who grow up in wealthy families receive an education that never appears on any transcript. They learn at dinner tables and in casual conversations what to do with money when you have it. They learn about tax strategy not from a course but from overhearing their parents talk to an accountant. They learn that certain investments exist, that certain doors open if you know to knock on them, that certain relationships are worth cultivating because of where they lead. You did not have that education. What you had was the internet, and eventually, enough curiosity to use it correctly. You read things that were written for people who already knew the basics, and you learned the basics anyway by reading slowly and asking questions that felt embarrassing to ask. You made mistakes that a single conversation with the right person would have prevented. You paid for those mistakes with time and with money and occasionally with both. And still you moved forward. Not because you were exceptional. Because you were consistent in a way that the absence of a safety net requires you to be. When there is no one to catch you, you learn not to fall. That is not a gift. It is a tax on people who didn't start with the infrastructure everyone else takes for granted. At some point, a number appears in your account that your parents never saw in theirs. It might be $50,000. It might be $100,000. The specific number matters less than what it represents, which is the first concrete evidence that the trajectory has changed. That you are not on the same financial path that was laid out for you by your circumstances. You look at that number and you feel two things simultaneously. The first is something close to relief. Not happiness exactly. Relief. Like a low-grade background tension you had been carrying for so long you stopped noticing it until it slightly loosened. The second is fear. Because now you have something to lose. And you were never taught how to protect something. You were taught how to get through the month. Protection is a different skill set, and you don't have it yet, and you are aware of that gap in real time as you stare at a number that suddenly feels fragile. You don't tell your family about the number. Not because you're ashamed. Because you don't have the language to explain it without it becoming complicated. You don't know how to say I have savings without it raising questions about why you aren't doing more with it, or requests that you genuinely cannot evaluate yet, or a shift in how people see you that you are not ready to navigate. So you say nothing. And you carry it alone. And that is its own kind of weight. You start educating yourself in earnest. Not casually, not passively. You treat the gap in your financial knowledge the way someone who missed years of school treats it, with urgency and with a specific kind of embarrassment that sharpens into discipline if you let it. You read books that were written for people who grew up knowing none of this was optional. You find advisors and you evaluate them carefully because you have learned, through 1 or 2 expensive lessons, that not everyone offering guidance is offering it in your interest. You learn about tax efficiency not as an abstract concept but as money you were leaving on the table every year without knowing it. You learn about asset allocation not as a theory but as the reason your early portfolio swung in ways that kept you up at night when it didn't have to. You learn about estate planning and you sit with a strange feeling of planning for a future that includes your own death, something no one in your family ever had enough assets to formally plan around. Each piece of knowledge arrives with a shadow. The shadow is the awareness of how long you operated without it, and what that cost you, and what it would have cost you if you hadn't eventually found it. You cannot go back and fix that. You can only go forward knowing more than you did. This part is not discussed enough. As your financial life diverges from the people you grew up with, something shifts in the texture of your relationships. It is not dramatic. It does not happen all at once. It happens in small moments that accumulate over years into a distance that no one planned and everyone eventually feels. You stop being able to complain about money in the way you used to. Not because you don't have financial stress, because you do, but because the nature of your stress is different now and you know it and they know it, and saying it out loud feels like a betrayal of something unspoken. You start making choices that look different from the outside. Where you live, what you drive or don't drive, how you talk about the future, what you worry about. These things quietly mark you as someone who has moved into a different category, and the people who love you most will sometimes feel that movement as a kind of abandonment even when that is the last thing you intend. Family becomes complicated in a specific way. Someone needs help. Financial help. And you have it now, and you know you have it, and they know you have it, and the question of whether to give it and how much and whether it helps or creates dependency is a question no one in your family has ever had to navigate from this side. There is no model for this. You make the best decision you can with incomplete information and you live with whatever it produces. This is one of the things no one tells you about being first. The money changes your options. It does not change your family. And the gap between those two things requires a kind of emotional labor that has no name and no end. The $1 million mark is not a moment. You think it will be a moment. You think you will log into an account and see a number and feel something final and earned and cinematic. What actually happens is more gradual. The number approaches over months. You watch it get close. You run projections. You recalculate after market movements. And then one day it is there, and the feeling is quieter than you expected, and more complicated, and lonelier than you thought it would be. There is no one to call who fully understands what you are telling them. Your parents are proud, genuinely, completely proud in a way that costs them something to express, because pride and something that resembles grief can exist in the same moment. Pride that you got here. Something unnameable about the distance the getting here represents. Your friends who are not on this path are happy for you and also slightly recalibrated in how they see you. The friendship is real. The recalibration is also real. Both things are true at the same time. You sit with the number. You sit with the quiet. And you understand for the first time that the milestone was never really about the money. It was about proving to the part of yourself that absorbed the scarcity, that believed people like you don't do this, that whispered you are not built for this, that the belief was wrong. That is what the number actually represents. Not wealth. Correction. After the crossing, the work does not stop. It changes texture. You are no longer building toward a threshold. You are managing something real, something with complexity and risk and responsibility that compound alongside the assets. The decisions get larger. The stakes attached to errors get larger. The need for knowledge you don't yet have continues to produce itself faster than you can address it. You begin thinking about what this means beyond yourself. Not in a grandiose way. In a practical way. You think about the generation that comes after you. You think about what it would have meant to you to grow up in a household where money was discussed differently, where the baseline was stability instead of scarcity, where the financial vocabulary was already in place before you needed it. You think about what you can build that outlasts the account balance. This is new territory. Your parents did not think this way because they could not afford to. Survival thinking crowds out legacy thinking. That is not a failure. It is an arithmetic problem. When the margin is thin, the horizon is short. You now have a longer horizon than anyone in your family has ever had. What you do with that horizon is the question that will define what the first million actually meant. Being first is not a crown. It is a position with specific obligations and specific costs that arrive without instructions. You carry the knowledge of where you came from in one hand and the responsibility of where you are going in the other. You translate between two worlds constantly, the world that shaped you and the world you are building, and the translation is exhausting in ways that people on either side of it cannot always see. You are the bridge, and bridges bear weight from both directions. That is their function. That is also their cost. But here is what is also true. Every decision you made correctly, every year you stayed consistent, every conversation you had with yourself about what you were building and why, that compounds too. Not just financially. In you. In how you move through the world. In the confidence that comes not from arrogance but from evidence. From having done something that nothing in your origin story suggested was possible and having done it anyway through ordinary decisions made consistently over time. The first million is not the end. It is the first proof. Proof that the story you were handed at birth was not the only story available to you. That the financial patterns of the people who raised you, the people who raised them, and every generation before that were not destiny. They were circumstance. And circumstance, unlike destiny, can be changed. You changed it. That is not a small thing. That is, in the full context of your family's history, everything.